The Hall System. Right of final refusal. Every member of the Hall System has an unrestricted right to leave the Hall System, abandoning any restrictions, punishments, protections, and privileges that come with it. Right of self-interest. Every Hall hand and free hand has a right to refuse to take part in any organized activity that they expect might lead to harm to them. Hall hand basic rights and privileges. Every Hall hand has a right to maximum liberty as is reasonably possible in society at large, with any reasonable imposition on their rights coming only from their individual Haller. Those rights include, but are not limited to, free access through public space, the right to free thought and expression, the right to bodily autonomy, the right to free association, the right to be secure about their own personal property, and the right to act in a manner that may be detrimental to themselves so long as it doesn't cause direct harm to the same rights of others. It is the duty of every Haller in a Hall system, from the individuals leading Halls to the highest chiefs, to protect these basic rights for every Hall hand and free hand in the Hall system, even to the detriment of the Haller protecting them. Every Hall hand has a right to physical protection from any outside threat to their person from any Haller, with the Haller obligated to provide a vigorous enough defense that any outside threat is incapable of terminating the requesting Hall hand's life, even at the cost of the Haller's own life or liberty. Right of freedom. Every Hall hand in the Hall system past the age of determination who has not had their self-determination restricted in an arbitration of Council of Chiefs has a right to be free of restrictions imposed on their rights by outside authority, and may at any time become a free hand under their clan at large. It is the responsibility of their former house chief and their clan chief to manage this severance of any new free hand in a way that protects the free hand's property interests. On declaration of this severance by a Hall hand with self-determination, the one invoking the right of freedom must be granted the rights due to a free hand immediately, and may not be restricted by their former Haller. Right to ultimate redress of Hall issues. Every Hall hand has a right to contact any Haller they so choose, unimpeded by any authority, including those from a Hall hand's Haller's authority over that Hall hand. The Haller they contact is not required to listen to the Hall hand so long as it is not the Hall hand's house or clan chief. A Hall hand's house or clan chief are required to acknowledge contact of any Hall hand under them, and consider any concern expressed. A Hall hand has the right to contact their adoptive or biological parents with the same authority as they have for contacting a Haller. A Hall hand with the right of self-determination also has the right to have any other Haller take charge of them at their own will, so long as their new Haller consents. Every Hall hand with self-determination has the right to invoke their right of freedom to become free hands at any time of their choice. Every house chief is required to visit every Hall hand, free hand, and Haller under them, and verify that all their rights are being properly respected at least every 100 days. Every clan chief is to accompany each of their individual house chiefs on one of these visiting tours for every house under them, at least once every 600 days for each house. A clan chief may request at any time to accompany a house chief, and a Haller may refuse entry in their hall to an unaccompanied house chief if the previous visit tour was less than 93 days ago. The visit by a chief does not entitle visitation inside a hall, but does require the immediate present contact of each and every Hall hand or any other charge under a Haller. A house chief accompanied by a clan chief may require a tour of a hall by a Haller for the purpose of verifying that all the rights of all under a hall are respected. Such a tour may only be done for that purpose, and requiring a tour for any other purpose or using something discovered on such a tour for any other purpose is a violation of the rights of the Haller and every other person who resides in that hall. A clan chief is required to visit every houseless free hand that holds residence in clan property at least once every 600 days. The visit by the clan chief does not entitle visitation inside their residence or any conversation beyond a verification that the free hand is alive and does not wish for the clan chief to find them a holler to take charge of them. If a free hand expresses a desire to be under a holler, the clan chief should endeavor to find a holler willing and capable of taking the free hand on as a hall hand. Right of irreverence. Every hall hand, free hand, holler, and all others have the right to show no respect or courtesy, to include lack of respect and utter disdain, to any with a position of authority above them. Those in a position of authority or responsibility should behave in a courteous manner to all those under them who are not part of their own hall. Duty of a holler to their hall hands. It is the duty of every holler to see to the feeding, sheltering, preservation of rights, and medical care of all hall hands under their charge, which includes providing a space where they can keep themselves and their personal property reasonably secure. Duty of a holler to be armed. A holler must carry about their persons a weapon whenever they are outside the confines of their house, the purpose of which includes ensuring they are capable to defend any hall hand in their awareness who may need defending. A chief must carry on their persons a weapon whenever they are outside the immediate area of their personal hall, the purpose of which includes ensuring they are capable to defend any holler or hall hand in their awareness who may need defending. A chief must also carry or have immediately accessible a stick of 1 1/4 inch diameter and at least 4 feet long for the purposes of providing for any hallish duel that may occur, and must adjudicate any hallish duel forfeits to ensure that the forfeit is both keeping with the dignity of any hallish individual, as well as ensuring that the terms of the forfeit are carried through when the duel is complete. Charge to the holler. The ultimate purpose of the hall system is to maximize liberty of the individual while providing a common defense and guard against things detrimental to liberty. It is for this purpose that a holler exists, to take on the sacred duty of standing as a bulwark and defender for that which is the most important ideal of them all, which is freedom. It must be remembered that the privilege granted to a holler to take the freedom from those they protect exists only for the furthering of the purpose, which is ultimately to maximize the freedom of all. Just as a chief is the arbiter of the collective, the holler is the arbiter of the individual. Both should remember the ultimate goal of preservation of freedom and stand against that which would restrict it, no matter how common the good seems that would prevent it. Freedom includes the choice to do things that aren't good for a person, and self-destruction should not be forbidden unless and until it would take the freedom from another. It is only in service to greater freedom that freedom should be curtailed, and not for a common good, but only for the common right of freedom. Charge to the hall hand. The hall system is to provide a safe place for the individual to be the greatest and most successful as possible. It does this by placing responsibility for that task on a holler, so that hall hands need only concern themselves with the things that make them better in their own eyes. For this reason, hall hands should obey their holler in all things. Furthermore, they should show deference to other hollers when other hollers are acting in active defense of them. A hall hand who feels otherwise should invoke their right of freedom and be responsible for themselves. Charge to the mediator. Justice requires fairness and impartiality. Every hallish individual has a right to a fair process, and therefore any holler or chief involved in deciding a mediation that could be seen as biased due to emotional or personal benefit in the outcome, even if no such bias exists in fact, should whenever possible remove themselves from the process of administering a dispute, to be replaced by somebody without such a concern. Furthermore, all who sit in judgment should emphasize justice over vengeance and attempt to permit all involved in any action room to grow to be better. Hall hand abuse. A holler has a duty to protect and defend their hall hands. They are given broad leeway to do so, which acknowledges their position to be responsible for the care and confinement of hall hands who engaged in criminal behavior. A holler may not engage in any sexual activity with a hall hand lacking self-determination. An exception is granted if a contract permitting sexual contact was created at the time the parties to the contract had self-determination. However, a party without self-determination has the right to revoke a contract containing sexual contact at any time, and once revoked, it may not be reestablished while the hall hand does not have self-determination. Hallish duel. A Hallish duel shall consist of each participant grabbing onto a long pole with both hands. Each participant will apply force onto the pole in such a manner as to cause the pole to strike their opponent without striking themselves. They shall score a point in the duel for each time their opponent is struck or for each time their opponent has no hands upon the pole. They shall forfeit the duel if they cause their opponent to bleed or suffer lasting harm. Upon causing their opponent to lose their grip on the pole with all their available hands, a participant will hold the pole parallel to the ground and allow their opponent to grip the pole with both hands again. If the pole is broken in the duel, both participants will be seen having lost. A duel will not continue past the point where one participant has scored at least 20 points and has 3 times the amount of points as their opponent has. A duel will not continue past the point where both parties agreed was the duel score goal. Both parties must agree to the terms of the forfeit prior to the duel, witnessed by a chief, with terms of public declaration that they lost a duel and to whom, considered the baseline if no agreement can be achieved. A Hallish duel must be administered by an impartial witness with the responsibility of a chief or other Haller designated to administer Hallish duels, or it will not be considered a Hallish duel. A Hallish duel may be fought by anyone and for any reason so long as it is administered by an appropriate individual and the participants agree to it. No duel forced without consent of both parties will be considered a Hallish duel. It is the right of all Hallish citizens to engage in Hallish duels. Hall sovereignty. Each hall is led by a Haller, who is responsible for all members of their hall. A Haller has absolute authority over their hall, as long as that authority does not result in non-consensual activities that cause lasting physical damage to their hall hands and is respectful of the hall hand's rights. There shall be nothing done to stop a hall hand from contacting any Haller they feel they need to as per a hall hand's rights. The contacted Haller, if not a house or clan chief of their hall, does not need to listen to the hall hand of another Haller, but the contact cannot be forbidden by anyone in the hall system. Hallers manage internal behavior in accordance with the agreements they make with their hall hands when the hall hand agrees to be made part of the Haller's hall, or according to local custom if no formalized agreement was made. In the event of a marriage between a hall hand and a Haller, the marriage will be seen as a written contract between the Haller and hall hand either in the local custom of marriage or per any formal marriage contract created between Haller and hall hand. The agreement of a relationship of a Haller and a hall hand made under self-determination shall be kept by a house chief establishing the relationship between the two, to include any expectations of behavior. The Haller shall maintain a copy. Lacking an agreement on file, it is expected that a Haller see to the basic needs of the hall hand per a Haller's purpose and duty for no recompense in perpetuity or until an agreement changing this nature is made. If no agreement is expressed to the house chief, it is expected that the relationship between the Haller and hall hand be maintained in accordance with the local custom of the house. For hall hands without self-determination, they are treated either per local custom of the house's traditional expectations of treatment or in accordance with the expected standards of management given by an arbitration of Council of Chiefs for hall hands without self-determination assigned to a Haller. Severance of agreement of hall hand and Haller. Severance of an agreement made between a hall hand and Haller occurs either due to a choice of the Haller or from a mediation or arbitration of Council of Chiefs. Severance by arbitration of Council of Chiefs or done through mediation requires misconduct or a failure to meet agreed standards by the Haller to a hall hand. A hall hand may allege a severance or hall hand misconduct and have the details adjudicated in a mediation or, if necessary, in an arbitration of council of chiefs. The severance requires the hauler to continue to provide for the lifestyle for the haul hand until such a time as a haul hand voluntarily becomes a free hand or hauler, or another hauler takes on the responsibility of the haul hand. The haul hand does not have the right to access their former hauler's haul and is required to follow reasonable commands by the hauler as per the charge to a haul hand. The severed haul hand must be given a quality of life comparable to either what the hauler's other haul hands experience or whatever their quality of life was while actively under the former hauler. In all other matters, any agreement that used to exist between the hauler and haul hand is revoked, and interactions between the hauler and haul hand should be managed in accordance with the local custom of the house of behavior from a haul hand to those who aren't part of their haul. The haul hand's former hauler may not mistreat the haul hand, and any limitations imposed on the haul hand in the future must be justifiable per the charge to the hauler. A haul hand has a right to sever specific provisions in an agreement with prior written notice to their hauler relating to intimacy or issues of a moral nature that are not part of the regular custom of the house. The haul hand should provide the same notice to their house chief to accompany their current agreement as is expected for any agreement between a haul hand and a hauler. A haul hand may not sever their full agreement with the hauler, nor may they sever provisions compliant to local custom of the house not intimate in nature, except through a willing transfer to another hauler or invoking their right of freedom. Haulish dissolution. A hauler who no longer wants to be part of a house may invoke an act of haulish dissolution. The hauler will take all their haul's resources and leave their house, clan, and greater society. If the hauler's haul is inside territory recognized as part of a haul system governance connected to their clan, they will be entitled to a no-interest loan from their clan, the loan amount being equal to the cost to build or purchase a residence for them, at their discretion, up to 35 times the amount they paid as their last periodic taxes. They will be given 180 days to move after disbursement of the loan amount. They will be required to pay back 1/300th of the sum every 30 days until the loan is paid off. If they miss a payment, an amount of 2% of a monthly payment will be added on to the total of the repayment. Every 45 days sooner they move out from their old house will have 1 month sum subtracted from the owed amount. The hauler may refuse the loan at their discretion. A house, through unanimous consent of all other haulers in the house as well as the house chief, may remove a haul through haulish dissolution. The act will be similar to the same act instituted through a hauler's choice, but will include a return of the sum of the last periodic taxes paid by the hauler returned to the hauler in addition to the loan. Hauler formation. To become a hauler, a free hand or haul hand will contact their direct chief and inform them of their intent for hauler formation. They must be established in the clan for at least 360 days, must not be incapable or unsuitable, must possess self-determination, must have at least one other person with self-determination voluntarily desiring to be the prospective hauler's haul hand, must have the intention to have a minimum of 2 haul hands under them at some point in the near future, must have the proven means to support all their initial declared haul hands for 400 days, and must be willing to care for a minimum of 1 other haul hand lacking self-determination, and as much as a number equal to 1/8 of their voluntary haul hands with self-determination to possibly be assigned to them for them to care for from haul hands that lack self-determination that may need care as determined by their clan. Their current direct chief will verify they meet the requirements. After verifying the prospective hauler meets the requirements, the chief will find a house with open space for a new haul with a house chief who is willing to accept the prospective hauler.
The prospective hauler will make their case to the current haulers of that house as to why they should be accepted as a hauler of that house. The house's haulers will then vote on accepting or rejecting the prospective hauler as a hauler. The majority of the haulers must agree for the prospective hauler to become a hauler of the house. The direct chief who verified the requirements of the potential new hauler will then help the new hauler and their haul hands move to their new haul if required, and the prospective hauler shall become a hauler of that house. Hauler absorption. A hauler made independent may petition any house chief for absorption of their haul into a house in the same way a new hauler is made in hauler formation if they are in the same haulish governance. In that event, they are responsible for any costs associated with relocation as if they are their own direct chief. Haul hand immigration. A hauler with a non-haulish outsider who wishes to become a haul hand is required to gain the approval of at least 1/8 the haulers of their house as well as their clan chief, or approval of 5/6 of all haulers of their house before they can accept the outsider as a haul hand in their haul. They will be required to put aside enough resources to support the new haul hand for 2,554 days. If the haul hand leaves the hauler's haul before the 2,554 days have passed, the hauler must give those resources to their clan to cover the potential cost of caring for the former outsider unless the former outsider voluntarily becomes an outsider again. Freehand immigration. Any outsider that wishes to become a potential freehand of a clan must provide enough resources to support 2 haul hands for 2,554 days based on the average cost of supporting a haul hand in the clan, provided to the clan they wish to join. The non-haulish outsider who wishes to become a freehand of the clan is also required to gain the approval of at least one house chief of the clan as well as their clan chief, or approval of the majority of the house chiefs in the clan. Hauler immigration. An outsider that wishes to become a potential hauler in a house must have approval of a house chief that they will make a haul with, direct approval of 2/3 the hauler in the house that they will make a haul with, are not objected to by any of their potential new clan's haulers, must have at least one person who currently lives under the haul system willing to be a haul hand to them, must show that they have the ability to support all the potential new haul hands their new haul will have for at least 400 days, must have the desire to fully integrate into the society of the house they wish to enter, and must have the desire to operate under the haul system as a hauler. House confederation. An individual behaving as if they are a hauler acting as a hauler house chief with 5 individuals behaving as if they are haulers acting under the individual behaving as a hauler house chief, who operate with and to the haul system but without a clan, may petition for absorption to the geographically nearest clan chief with less than 20 houses as a house under that clan. The clan must accept them as long as they do not provide any drain on established houses or halls, and have operated for at least 1,820 days acting as a house under the haul system and have similar customs and language to other houses under the clan. They may be accepted without meeting those requirements with the agreement of 3/4 of all house chiefs in the clan, provided the potential new house operates with and to the haul system. Haulish confederation. A chief in an area of geographical vicinity or vicinity of custom with a haul system governance with a maximum hierarchical tier equal or greater to their own may petition for absorption into the greater governance system of the chief of the governance structure, or a tier 1 higher than the petitioner if the petitioner is not equal in tier. A grand conclave will be called by the petitioned chief, with the issue being absorbing the haulish governance petitioner into their own. The issue will be a haulish policy state, with the petitioning governance structure being part of and included in the Grand Conclave. Absorption will not occur if the voting requirements for a Hallish policy stance on the issue are not met. Clan recognition. A Hallish governance operating as a clan in accordance with the Hall system with an appropriate number of entities operating as houses, each operating with an appropriate number of entities operating as halls, and appropriate governing structure, having done so for a period of at least 1,820 days, is a clan under the Hall system no matter how it was initially formed or any other consideration, and all entities operating under the clan are the house or halls as is appropriate for the entity. Hand of merit. A Hallish person who has served in the past as a Haller for at least 1,234 days and has never been found unsuitable may become a Hand of Merit. A Hand of Merit may stand in for any role a Haller is needed for on a temporary basis, even though the Hand of Merit may be a free hand, a Hall hand, or some other form of Hallish citizen. Arbitration of Council of Chiefs. An arbitration of Council of Chiefs is begun by an individual or someone tasked by an individual approaching a house or clan chief of someone who harmed them or their charge. The approaching individual will inform the chief of who committed the harm and a detailed explanation of the harm that was committed. The chief so informed will inform their own clan chief if they are not the same individual, and the said clan chief will contact or get the information from the contacting harmed individual to identify their representative in the manner. Their representative must be a Haller or freehand, or an outsider capable of being held responsible for harm done should the arbitration of Council of Chiefs find that the accusation was false and made with ill intent. This representative will be the accusing. The clan chief will then approach the Haller of the one who was accused of doing harm, or the individual accused if the person is a Haller or freehand. The exact accusation will be told to the approached accused individual, and the approached accused individual will be instructed to have their representative contact the clan chief. This representative must be a Haller or freehand and will be the defending. The clan chief will contact the accusing and the defending and arrange a time and a place for all parties to select advocates, where advocate selection will happen. For the selection of advocates, the Haller who is accusing will select an accusing advocate house chief for their position through random draw from all house chiefs in their clan minus the accusing, the defending, and their clan chief. The Haller who is defending will select a defending advocate house chief through random draw from all house chiefs in the clan of the defending clan minus the accusing, the defending, their clan chief, and any other selected advocate. The clan chief of the defending will select a system advocate house chief through random draw from all house chiefs in the clan of the accusing, minus the accusing, the defending, the clan chief of the accusing, themselves, and any other selected advocate. The clan chief and accusing may reject their first draw and redraw. The accusing may select the redraw accusing advocate among their first or second draw option. The clan chief must keep their system advocate second draw if they reject the first draw. The defending may select as their draw their first draw, their second draw, or the rejected draw of the clan chief or accusing if there was a rejected house chief from either. If due to disqualification or other reasons there are not enough house chiefs for an arbitration of Council of Chiefs, Hallers may stand in as house chiefs. If there's no clan chief, Hallers will replace house chiefs and the house chief will replace the clan chief. A Hallish outsider citizen will use their Hallish outsider citizen representative as their clan chief, with a random draw of other citizen outsider representatives of their management territory as the source of their advocates. However, the system advocate must come from a clan. The exact clan the draw is taken from will be chosen by the Hallish outsider citizen representative acting as the clan chief to the Hallish outsider citizen. If the accusing is an outsider, they may find a clan chief willing to allow their clan to stand in, or they will be treated as the same clan as the defending. If an outsider is a defending in an arbitration of Council of Chiefs, They will be required to find a clan willing to act as their representative in the manner as if they were a freehand member of that clan, or to find a Hallish outsider citizen representative in the same management territory the issue that the outsider was accused of occurring in, willing to act as their representative as if they were a Hallish outsider citizen of their district. After the meeting to select advocates, the system advocate will be contacted by the clan chief and the arbitration management will be put into their hands. The system advocate will contact all others and arrange a time and a place to hold a council of chiefs. The council of chiefs will be required to meet within a month of being formed. Failure to do so is justification for anyone responsible for the failure to be found unsuitable. The three advocates will sit with the clan chief of the defending to hear the arguments of the accusing and defending. The clan chief will maintain order and manage the meeting, but will not offer input on the deliberations of the advocates nor make any arguments on behalf of the defending or accusing. The accusing and the defending may pick a different hauler to make their arguments for them, but the accusing remains responsible for statements made to the council of chiefs on their behalf. The advocates will sit and consider the evidence and the arguments until they come to a decision which all three advocates agree with, or one in which two house chiefs agree with, which the clan chief of the accusing determines to be an acceptable outcome. The clan chief of the defending may make recommendations at the end of the council for findings of unsuitability, incapability, or terms of recompensance or discipline, but may not have a role in establishing the truth of the matter for the deliberations of the council of chiefs. If the defending advocate and the defending from an arbitration of council of chiefs both do not feel the judgment of the arbitration was fair, they may appeal to a full moot of chiefs. The clan chief of the defending will be the mediator of the moot of chiefs, or a clan chief chosen by the defending if the defending has no clan chief. All house chiefs of all involved clans will sit together and hear arguments and evidence. The system advocate who sat in the initial arbitration will then state what the decision was and explain to the best of their ability why the decision was chosen. The entire assembly will then vote to accept the judgment. If 2/3 of all present accept it, the judgment will stand as a verified judgment of arbitration of council of chiefs. Otherwise, an arbitration of council of chiefs will happen again, barring the three house chiefs who already sat in arbitration from sitting in it again. If this ruling is not different from the first ruling, the ruling stands as a verified judgment of arbitration of council of chiefs. If it is different and the accusing and defending do not both agree with the new decision, all house chiefs of all involved clans will be summoned again for another moot of chiefs and asked to select between the two rulings which to apply. Split rulings that differ wildly on incapability or unsuitability findings should weigh towards keeping hall hands without self-determination safe and halls intact. Any other tied votes in a full moot will be resolved by a hallish duel between the accusing and defending. Moot of chiefs. A moot of chiefs may be called between two clans by a clan chief to another clan chief to resolve matters that require cooperation between two clans. A moot of chiefs will consist of an assembly of all house chiefs of both involved clans. Unless otherwise agreed, the clan chief receiving the call to a moot will sit as mediator for the moot of chiefs, and will ensure all chiefs have an opportunity to fully address the entire moot on all issues the moot was called for. The moot will hold a vote for each issue it was called for, and to receive agreement from the moot, 2/3 of the assembly must agree to it. For issues involving more than two clans, after the moot has established its position on issues it was called for, the moot will select representatives for its positions to be sent to an assembly of clans. The moot will elect 3 of its members to send to an assembly of clans as the moot representative. The representatives will travel to the location chosen by the moot or tier chief calling for the assembly of clans, the cost of transportation coming half out of each clan involved in the moot where the representatives were chosen. Assembly of clans. An assembly of clans can be called by any moot of chiefs, or a tier chief with sufficient cause. Any moot or chief that calls an assembly of clans will contact the chiefs that need to be involved in assembly of clans, and those clans called to an assembly of clans will have their own moot of chiefs with their peers to arrange a proper by-clan representation for themselves for the assembly. The moot or tier chief that called the assembly of clans will arrange for the location, lodging, and security of the assembly of clans. If a called assembly of clans involving a clan that has not already been involved in a moot regarding the issues before the assembly of clans, the clan that has not been involved in a moot on the issue will find a clan with which to hold a moot with, and will ensure that they are represented by moot representatives in the assembly of clans consisting of their 3 elected chiefs of a by-clan moot arguing for the position the moot agreed on. Both clans don't need to be affected by the issue to participate in a moot to elect representatives on issues before the assembly of clans, so long as one of the 2 clans involved in the moot sending moot representatives is involved in the issue. When the assembly meets, all of the gathered moot representatives will select one of the moot representatives to be a mediator of the assembly of clans by a simple majority vote. The mediator for the assembly of clans will have the duty of picking one advocate for and one advocate against on each issue before the assembly of clans from the moot representatives who volunteer to speak for or against each issue, or tasking one to take the position if none volunteer. The assembly as a whole will hear the argument presented by the representative selected by the assembly mediator for each position for each issue. After hearing both sides of an issue as well as any supplemental speaker from outsiders or from other assemblies of clans, the mediator will recess the assembly to allow a short period of time for the moot representatives to confer and debate amongst themselves. After the short period of discussion and debate, the mediator will call for a vote by the assembly, and all moot representatives will vote for the issue that has been called by the mediator. Each of the 3 moot representatives of each moot will have a vote. No vote will be counted until all representatives from all clans have voted for, against, or abstaining. No vote shall be done in secret, nor will any vote be held where the positions that each representative voted for will be concealed or hidden. Any moot representative that does not vote without justifiable reasons that could not be predicted in advance preventing them from voting will have failed their duty as a hauler representing their moot. Once one issue has been voted on, the mediator will repeat the process for the next issue until all issues before the assembly of clans have been voted on. When no more issues are before the assembly of clans, the mediator will adjourn the assembly of clans. For an issue to change in the position of the Hallish policy state of the assembled clans, an issue must have 4/5 of the available votes. For an issue that is not a change in the Hallish policy stance of the assembled clans because there has been no previous Hallish policy stance on the issue, a simple majority of the votes will establish the Hallish policy stance. For an issue that would change a Hallish policy stance of the assembled clans, an issue must have 2/3 of the available votes or the stance will remain the same. A stance is the policy decision that consists of internal interactions amongst clans. A state is a policy decision that consists of external interactions between clans and outsiders. A change in the Hallish policy of a collective of clans should always include in the assembly all the clans that made the initial policy, or a representative of the same if they are not under the same hierarchical tier chief, and inclusion of the previous full assembly of clans in addition to a new assembly of clans is not practical. The representative of an assembly of clans regarding its decisions to any other assembly of clans is the mediator of the last assembly of clans that involved all the clans of any Hallish policy being addressed by an assembly of clans of another hierarchical tier chief, or by an individual selected by that assembly to act as representative of their assembly of clans to other assemblies of clans. Any representative of an assembly of clans is required to take the position the assembly of clans took on any Hallish policy issue they are representing their assembly for. A representative of an assembly of clans will be speaking with the authority of all clans it represents, but will not cast a vote in any outside assembly of clans it speaks to unless it is part of a grand conclave. A representative will be granted the ability to address an assembly of clans in any issue it wishes to address, granted by the mediator of an assembly of clans and outside the specific for and against speakers inside the assembly of clans. This address will not be considered a position on the issue, but a statement of a position by the assembly of clans that the representative represents. This may include advocacy for a specific side to be adopted by the current assembly of clans, but it is still to be seen as a statement from that other assembly of clans and not count towards statements of advocacy for or against an issue for the sake of determining speakers for issues. Grand Conclave. A tier chief may call for a grand conclave in response to outside threats or large-scale emergencies that require mobilization of significant effort that may require a muster of clan conscripts in an involuntary manner. A tier chief calling for a grand conclave will go to the tier chiefs below them and inform them that they are calling for a grand conclave. If there is a tier above them, they will also inform that tier chief. The tier chiefs below them will contact any tier chiefs below them and inform them of the grand conclave, which will do the same until the contact reaches the clan tier. The clan chiefs will immediately hold moots of chiefs. The moots will hold assemblies of clans of all those under their direct tier, with the organization of the assemblies of clans done by the tier chief that passed the call on to the clan chiefs. The individual assemblies of clans under each tier chief will all have their representatives for the issue meet and perform as if they are an assembly of clans as a grand conclave, who will then send their 3 representatives to the next tier. The tier chief this occurs under will be responsible for the organization of the assembly of clans and will be responsible for funding travel expenses of the assembly representatives to the next higher grand conclave. This will occur until an assembly of clans has occurred under the highest tier chief who called for the grand conclave. A tier chief may not send any clan conscripts outside of clan territory, nor call for an involuntary muster of clan conscripts without approval by their grand conclave of the tier chief wishing to direct the clan conscripts to act, unless approved and directed by a higher tier chief who has a greater grand conclave approval to do so. The higher tier chief that was contacted may, if they choose, take over the call of a grand conclave. If they do, they must contact their own higher tier chief and contact the other lower tier chiefs to hold grand conclaves in the manner of a tier chief instigating a call for a grand conclave. During deliberations of a grand conclave, regular humanitarian efforts are considered a Hallish policy stance, while any action that could put a Hall conscript in a position where they might have to deliberately kill someone outside of Hallish governance territory is considered a Hallish policy state. If there is any question and the position could result in harm done by one to another, the consideration should be evaluated as a Hallish policy state. A chief cannot send clan conscripts out in a hostile manner against outsiders if a higher tier grand conclave has forbidden aggressive actions against that group of outsiders. They may call for an involuntary muster in anticipation of the issue causing harm if authorized by their own tier's grand conclave. A grand conclave that has authorized hostile action requires another grand conclave to be called reauthorizing that action every 2,554 days. Failure to gain reauthorization will revert a tier chief's authority to deploy or muster clan conscripts to the state prior to gaining authorization, and all involuntary muster periods will expire 180 days after the reauthorizing time elapsed. Clans may at any time come together in moots of chiefs, assemblies of clans, or grand conclaves organized from the bottom up to revoke a tier chief's authority to deploy clan conscripts in an aggressive manner. If an active authorization is revoked, all involuntary muster periods will expire 30 days from that date, and any organized clan conscripts operating under that former authorization have the right to voluntarily switch their service status to involuntary. Self-determination. A hall hand is expected to have self-determination if they are past the age of determination, which is the age that the greater governance structure agrees through regular custom is the age at which somebody can fully execute self-determination. Self-determination can be removed from a hall hand who already has self-determination only through judgment of an arbitration of Council of Chiefs, and a judgment of that nature should clearly describe why self-determination was stripped away and explain exactly the circumstances by which it should be granted back, or else be considered invalid. Any such circumstances should be reasonable and in accordance with the duty of a hauler to hall hands. The details of why a hall hand does not have self-determination should never be hidden for any cause, even if such cause may cause immediate and imminent danger or psychological harm to others. A hall hand whose self-determination has been removed should have expected standards of management for a hauler to implement. Anyone under the hall system past the age of determination may invoke their right of final refusal and leave the governance of the hall system, even if such will inevitably result in their harm, regardless if they have been judged by an arbitration of Council of Chiefs. A hall hand who has had self-determination removed and invoked the right of final refusal, and later returned without addressing the issues expressed by the arbitration of Council of Chiefs by which the Council determined they should not have the right to self-determination, may not invoke the right of final refusal again for 2,554 days. A hall hand without self-determination is considered incapable of giving consent or acting in their own interest, and therefore cannot enter binding agreements. For this reason, any hauler granted authority over them is expected to act according to the best custom of their house and clan in the hall hand's care, prioritizing the attention to their well-being and health, both physical and mental. A hauler who believes themselves incapable of handling or caring for a hall hand without self-determination should find somebody willing and able to care for the hall hand, and transfer the hall hand as quickly as possible to that hauler's care with the supervision of their house or clan chief. Unsuitability determination. If any house chief suspects or knows of an act of unsuitability performed by a hauler, the house chief can and should have the suitability of the hauler in question adjudicated on in an arbitration of Council of Chiefs, with themselves being considered the accusing. For other actions that bring about questions of suitability, the house chief of the one who counts as the triggering party will act as the accusing. A hauler found unsuitable in an arbitration of Council of Chiefs will be unsuitable as a hauler. A hauler found unsuitable may have their hall dissolved if a replacement hauler cannot be agreed upon by the hall's hall hands. And if their hall is dissolved due to them being found unsuitable, they may not insist on their house or clan providing them a residence outside the hall system in an act of hallish dissolution. Incapability determination. If a house chief feels a hauler under them might be unsafe or incapable of caring for their hall hands, the house chief feeling that way can have the capability of the hauler in question adjudicated on in an arbitration of Council of Chiefs. The house chief of the one who counts as the triggering party will act as the accusing house chief. Any incapable finding will list all the failings by which they are found incapable. Any new incapabilities found at a later date require a new finding of incapability in an arbitration of Council of Chiefs, and may not be added to a finding of incapability after the fact. A hauler found incapable may have their hall dissolved and will become a free hand if that is determined to be necessary by a Council of Chiefs. A hauler found incapable can select a new hauler for their haul for the duration of the hauler's incapability. If the other hauler accepts the responsibility, the former hauler's haul will be managed by the appointed hauler, and the haul cannot be dissolved in a finding of incapability. A former hauler who is incapable will not be able to manage a haul until they have addressed the items that made them incapable. If they do not agree to a finding of incapability, they may insist on an act of haulish dissolution. A haulish dissolution will be considered no fault in an incapable finding. Consequences of inability. A hauler found unsuitable by an arbitration of Council of Chiefs will be considered a free hand in their clan at large the moment they are found unsuitable. An incapable hauler may not act as a hauler for as long as they are incapable, and a temporary hauler must be appointed by them or their chief to manage their haul until such time as they are capable again. They will be treated as if they are a haul hand with self-determination of the appointed hauler until they are once again capable. A former hauler found incapable or unsuitable may not be a hauler again until they have demonstrated all the findings of incapability or unsuitability have been addressed as recognized by their clan chief. In the event a haul loses its hauler and no instructions were left as to what hauler would take over in the event a haul lacks a hauler, it is the responsibility of the house chief to manage the haul until such a time as a new hauler may take over the haul. If there is no house chief, it will be the responsibility of all haulers in the house to manage the haul by committee until such a time as a new house chief is selected or a new hauler is established via consent of the haul hands of the haul. Addressing incapability. A hauler found incapable may request an arbitration of Council of Chiefs every 30 days if they disagree with their clan chief regarding addressment of findings of incapability. They will act as accusing and may function as if they were a hauler for the purposes of representation. The clan chief will appoint a defending of their own choice. If the clan chief and an adjudication of a council of chiefs both agree findings of incapability have not been addressed, the hauler found incapable may become a hauler again after 2,554 days with no further action required. Otherwise, the arbitration of Council of Chiefs and the clan chief must agree before the incapable individual is no longer considered incapable. Addressing unsuitability. If a haul is dissolved by a finding of unsuitability, the hauler's clan chief will select 2 house chiefs to sit with 3 other house chiefs that were the advocates in a finding of unsuitability during an arbitration of Council of Chiefs, or chosen at random if there was no Council of Chiefs to find unsuitability. These 5 house chiefs will work together to find a consensus to divide all the hall's common assets amongst its former hall hands, as well as safely transfer all hall hands who don't have self-determination from the unsuitable hauler to other haulers. All other hall hands must find an alternative hauler or declare themselves free hands. The new free hands will be given a grace period under which they can either have their former house chief recognize them as free hands under their old house or be given assistance to move to clan at-large space. Their house will be responsible for resources associated with transferring the new free hands to new adequate living quarters in clan areas, as well as covering housing costs for them for a period of 45 days, although the free hand will be immediately responsible for all other costs. A hauler found unsuitable may request an arbitration of Council of Chiefs after 2,554 days have passed, and again every 30 days if they feel they are no longer unsuitable. They will act as accusing and may function as if they were a hauler for the purposes of representation. The clan chief will appoint a defending of their own choice. If the clan chief and adjudication of a Council of Chiefs both agree findings of unsuitability have been addressed, the unsuitable individual will no longer be considered unsuitable. Causes of unsuitability. A hauler shall be unsuitable if they perform any of these actions: kill any haul hand, hauler, or free hand outside an incident of defense of others, or through an action, inaction, or incompetence create a dangerous situation resulting in a haul hand's death. Through deceit or trespass, take any object or resource belonging to another against their will. through violence or threat of violence, take any object or resource belonging to another against their desire. Take action with a haul hand of another hauler that would cause detriment to the other hauler or haul hand without the knowledge and agreement of the hauler of the haul hand. Fail to be armed without justifiable reason outside the presence of their immediate haul. Fail to defend any haul hand from risk of physical violence when aid was requested. Leave lasting damage in an act of discipline upon the body of a haul hand that does not have self-determination. Commit sexual acts with a haul hand who does not have self-determination without a contract that included the permissibility of such acts entered into prior to the haul hand losing self-determination. Encourage sexual acts between haul hands where either or both lack self-determination without a contract that included the permissibility of such acts between the specific parties entering into prior to the haul hands in question losing self-determination. Commit negligent or incompetent behavior that results in a haul hand without self-determination engaging in a sexual act with any other outside of a contract that included the permissibility of such acts between the parties that engaged in the sexual act with the contract entered into prior to the haul hands in question losing self-determination. Force a haul hand or knowingly permit one to be subject to non-consensual physical violence or non-consensual sexual activities. Engage in any sexual activity forbidden by contract with a haul hand under the hauler's authority. Refuse to engage in a duel demanded by an individual of whom a falsehood has been stated about them by the hauler or one of the hauler's haul hands that resulted in verifiable physical, financial, or reputational harm by the individual. Breach their duty to protect one of their haul hand's rights. Knowingly attempt to infringe on the rights of a free hand without the cause of stopping an active greater infringement on others. Knowingly attempt to infringe on the rights of another hauler's haul hands without the cause of stopping an active greater infringement on others. Willingly violate obligations due to a haul hand from a severance of agreement of haul hand and hauler. As a chief, perform an act done in corruption for the benefit of themselves to the detriment of someone lower tier under them, where then they do not resign when the act of corruption is discovered, nor perform a ritualistic self-maiming which includes a visible expression of the violated trust placed in them as a chief. Perform an act of cowardice that leaves a haul hand to face a dangerous situation alone. Violate or permits one under their charge to violate common humanitarian restrictions on behavior of a military organization during a time of war, the bare minimum standard of behaving as a signatory nation to the treaties of 1949 known as the Geneva Conventions, and treating all opposition forces as if they are signatories to the same, regardless of their disqualifying behavior or status of the ratification of the same. Execute or permits execution of an act furthering the concept of genocide against any other individual or group. Commit an act of ill repute so heinous to be universally considered an unforgivable violation of the dignity of an individual or society. Permit the new or continued enslavement of another being when it is within the hauler's immediate power to stop it. Engage in commerce with someone the hauler knows engages in the institution of slavery. A hauler who breaches their duty to protect the haul hand's rights or violates these or other ethical obligations is unsuitable, and accusations of such should be adjudicated in an arbitration of council of chiefs, evaluating the facts involved and taking appropriate measures as the arbitration of council of chiefs decides, which should include a determination of unsuitability if warranted. Death. Upon the unnatural death of a hall hand, a free hand, hauler, guest, or innocent outsider, the hauler most responsible for the safety of the area in which it occurred shall be evaluated for suitability as a standard matter of course. The triggering party will either be the hauler who lost their hall hand, or, if the hauler is the same as who lost their hall hand, a house chief selected at random from the house chiefs of the clan in which the hauler who lost their hall hand is in, that is not the direct house chief of the accused, or a house chief from within the hall system selected by an individual who had a reasonable connection to the deceased to advocate appropriately upon their behalf. Unsuitability in such an arbitration should only be found in such cases if the death came from a cause of unsuitability. Crime, mediation, and dispute resolution. If any hall hand commits an act that harms another hall hand outside their hall, the chief in common of the haulers of the injured and injuring hall hands will sit as mediator of any dispute, or a hauler chosen by the chief at the start of the chief's term with the purpose of mediating such disputes. The hauler of the harming hall hand will be responsible for all judgments of the chief, and judgments will be directed to the hall with the hauler responsible, or freehand if they are not a hall hand. The hauler's clan chief will be responsible for ensuring all judgments are properly carried out. If the injuring party is a hauler and the injury was cause for unsuitability, they shall be evaluated first for suitability, with the injured party acting as the accuser prior to any mediation action. If the act is between two hall hands of the same hauler, either party may request a different hauler inside their own house to act as advocate for them before their house chief. An outsider to the governing hallish structure may request any hauler in the clan of the injuring party to act as an advocate for them in front of the clan's chief. Haulers speaking as advocates must attend the mediation and advocate for the party having them speak for them. If the injured or injuring party does not agree to resolve this through mediation, the issue will go before an arbitration of council of chiefs. For mediations or adjudications of a freehand or former hauler who cannot or will not execute judgment decisions upon themselves, the freehand or former hauler will be found to be incapable of self-determination for a period of the judgment's action and be assigned to a hauler who will be responsible for them and will see that the judgment is carried out utilizing the freehand or incapable hauler's resources as is appropriate. If the judgment of mediation is refused outright, the issue will go before an arbitration of council of chiefs. If arbitration is refused outright, or if a verified judgment from an arbitration of council of chiefs is refused, the individual refusing judgment will be exiled from all spaces owned or controlled by the governing hallish structure until both the judgment has been carried out and 2,554 days have elapsed. The one refusing the judgment will be viewed as if they invoked their right of final refusal. Care of those without self-determination. Every person in the hall system under the age of determination who has not been granted self-determination must be part of a hall. Children shall first be placed in a hall with their biological parent with a preference for a hall hand parent. Then a hall with the hauler parent of the lowest tier hauler. Then a hall which agrees to accept a willing parent and the child. Then the hall containing the oldest direct relative to the child. Then the hall of any direct relative. Then the hall of any relative. Then the hall of the hauler seen as the best fit by the clan chief of the hall that inspired the search. The biological parent's genetic line may be replaced by an adoptive parent's genetic line with the consent of the child. Any disputes amongst equals regarding the placement should be settled with mutual consent or a duel if both cannot agree. For hall hands, when there is no clear understanding of where placement should be, it will be negotiated by any haulers involved, plus the house chief of any halls considered for hosting the hall hand by any council of chiefs. If there is no arbitration of council of chiefs active and placement is needed outside of the guidelines for placing a hall hand without self-determination, an arbitration of council of chiefs will be started, with the individual who is last the most directly responsible for the hall hand acting as defending, and a random hauler under the same clan as the one determined to be defending selected to act as accusing. A hall hand found to be under the age of self-determination is considered as having their right to be a free hand restricted by arbitration of council of chiefs until the date under which they are considered capable of self-determination. The lifting of this restriction in recognition of early self-determination may be established by arbitration of council of chiefs, where a hauler acting at the request of the hall hand below the age of self-determination will act as accusing, and the hauler currently responsible for the hall hand will act as defending. If they are the same person, the house chief of the hall hand will act as defending, or a hauler of the house chosen at random by the house chief. A former hall hand that has acquired early self-determination must be permitted by the house chief and subsequent house chiefs to remain a member of the house as a free hand, and their right of self-determination must be protected by the house chief as one of their basic rights unless that right is taken away in a future arbitration of council of chiefs for a cause where an individual above the age of self-determination would face a similar consequence. A freehand parent of a child under the age of self-determination who is placed in a hall will have the option granted to them at the time of placement to join the hall the child is placed in with no more onerous requirements than those per custom. If they refuse at the time and change their mind at a later date, they will require the consent of the hauler to become a member of the hall. Hall taxation and house fund management. Each hall will provide 1/25 of its earned available free resources to its house annually, the method of which will be set by custom or agreement by all haulers of the house and managed by the house chief. The maximum funding limit for the house is any amount in excess of what it would cost to build a duplicate of the house and support all members of the house and common infrastructure for 366 days. Approximately every 366 days, set in a predictable annual way, the house will send all resources in excess of its maximum funding limit it receives in taxes back to each hall, sending to each an amount proportional to what they sent. The house funds are for the good of the house or to provide for growth of the clan. They are not to be used for any other purpose. A house may not use funds for any purpose other than establishing a house's minimum expected state if the house is not in its minimum expected state. The minimum expected state of a house is owning enough property where it can meet its basic requirements, those being able to provide residence space for every hall under it at no cost to the hall, able to provide space for any resident of the house to engage in acts of industry or commerce at no cost to a resident, able to provide private storage space and additional storage space for the expected industrial, commercial, and agricultural output of the entire house at reasonable rates, and have enough property in which agricultural activities can be done that would provide enough yield to be reasonably expected to be capable of feeding all members of the house in an indefinite basis. If the house is at its maximum funding limit still after sending the entirety of taxes received back to its halls, any funding or resources the house gets shall be divided evenly amongst all halls of the house. A house should not hold in house ownership any property in excess of what it can reasonably expect to require in the future, and should endeavor to sell excess into private ownership of other members of its clan, so long as it does not endanger the future of the house. A house shall not sell or transfer house property to any person not a member of its clan if such a transfer would create a gap or hole in the continuous property owned or controlled by its clan and clan members. House taxation and clan fund management. Each house will provide 1/50th of either whatever it receives annually from its halls, or 1/50th of its maximum funding limit, whichever is higher, to its clan. This will be done approximately every 366 days, set in a predictable annual way and sent by the house chief to the clan chief. The maximum funding limit for the clan is any amount in excess of 25 times the maximum funding limit of the highest maximum funding limit of one of its houses. Approximately every 366 days, set in a predictable annual way, the clan will send all resources in excess of its maximum funding limit back to each house, sending to each an amount proportional to what they sent. The funds raised from the houses and sent to the clan are to establish the clan in its minimum expected state, to act as a lending source in support of all houses of the clan, to fund the establishment of new houses or new clans, to provide personalized military equipment and aid to protect its houses and other clans in its governing structure, to reimburse clan conscripts for their activated time, to fund education for clan conscripts, to establish public works for the benefit of all of its houses, to connect to the infrastructure systems of adjacent clans and to maintain such infrastructure, to establish and maintain infrastructure for the benefit of its houses, or for loans related to a management council it is part of. Those loans are to provide low-interest loans to the management council it is part of, or loans to clan members or other individuals that are in the same management council when the loan is for property in the management territory or will grow the management territory the clan is part of. A clan must use at least half of all received resources to achieve its minimum expected state if the clan is not in its minimum expected state and can move closer to its minimum expected state through use of its resources. The minimum expected state of a clan is owning enough property and having such property improved upon where it can meet its basic requirements. Those being able to provide a resident space for every free hand under it at a reasonable rate, able to provide space for all free hands of the clan to engage in acts of industry and commerce at a reasonable rate, able to provide private storage space and additional storage space at reasonable rates for the expected industrial, commercial, and agricultural output of free hands utilizing clan facilities, having enough property in which agricultural activities can be done that would provide enough yield to be reasonably expected to be capable of feeding all free hands of the clan on an indefinite basis, as well as an additional amount to equal 1/100th of the population of the entire clan as a backup surplus, having property and improvements on which the clan governance services may operate out of, having property and improvements on which common infrastructure services may operate out of, having continuous property connecting to the owned property of each of its houses on which infrastructure may be connected, and having enough property where a zone may be established for commerce between a clan and outsiders to safely occur. If the clan is at its maximum funding limit and has already returned all taxes to its houses, any funding or resources the clan gets from sources outside of its houses shall be distributed to each house based on a percentage of population of the clan inside that house. A clan must provide as part of its governance services a facility for medical care, a facility for educational activities, a facility for ensuring access to clean water, and a facility to perform basic governance requirement functions such as handling elections and arbitration of councils of chiefs, and a facility to store, maintain, and train for any equipment and personnel used in clan conscript services. A clan should not hold in clan ownership property in excess of what it can reasonably expect to require in the future, and should endeavor to sell excess into private ownership to members of its clan, so long as it does not endanger the future of the clan. A clan shall not sell or transfer clan property to any person not a member of its clan if such a transfer would create a gap or hole in the continuous property owned or controlled by the clan or its members. Greater taxation and fund management. Each clan or further tier shall provide 1/2500th of its maximum funding limit to the tier above it. The maximum funding limit for the tier is any amount in excess of 25 times the maximum funding limit of the tier below it. This will be done approximately every 366 days, set in a predictable annual way and managed by the tier chief and sent to the next higher tier chief. Approximately every 366 days, set in a predictable annual way, the tier will send all resources in excess of its maximum funding limit back to each entity that funded it, sending to each an amount proportional to what they sent. This funding shall be for acting as a lending source in support of all tiers under it, for freely aiding any chief tier under it that cannot fund their responsibilities due to unexpected disasters, for the support and defense of the tier at large, to reimburse clan conscripts for their activated time, to fund education for clan conscripts, to provide funding for infrastructure projects to connect to similar tiers and maintain such infrastructure, or to provide for humanitarian efforts to others, so long as funding for the effort does not cause any harm to the lower tiers and does not exceed more than 1/50th of what it receives annually, and the tier and all the chiefs of the immediate lower tier have no debt, while ensuring it will not gain any debt itself through such action. A holler may request an accounting of the funding of its house, or request a copy of the most recent report issued by a higher tier chief. A house chief may request a full accounting and perform an audit of any holler in their house once every 600 days to verify honesty in a holler's reported income, going back as much as 900 days. Resources expended by a holler in any audit should be reimbursed from the house's funding. At least every 366 days, every chief should make a report of their income and expenses and provide a copy of their report to every chief directly under them, as well as a copy to the chief above them. Every holler has a right to access the record of expenditures of any chief over them, the request made through their own house chief, and adequate time allowed for copies of reports not kept by any specific chief to get to the holler. This report should be done in a predictable annual manner. Every chief will be required to make and publish a budget every 366 days, which shall include a report on expected income and expected return of resources back to its funders. The budget must be approved by majority vote of its direct lower tier. If a budget fails to be approved, the budget will revert to the last budget that was approved that had a positive balance. A chief is required to adhere to their budget barring unforeseen circumstances. Every chief's budget should have an amount that is considered the minimum conscript reimbursement amount. It shall be the amount that is seen as fair for the reimbursement in resources for the use of a day's time of an individual under the hall system. No person shall be paid while acting as a clan conscript or as a person contracted by a chief for a service to the staff of the chief or any government structure under the chief less or more than the conscript reimbursement amount. Sizing. No house may consist of more than 25 halls. A house that holds more than 25 halls will be split into 2 houses, one of which will hold at least 5 halls. The process will be mediated by the clan chief. If there is no clan tier, the halls will be divided evenly, with the original house using all available funding to establish the new house. Any shortfall for the costs for establishing a new house will be evenly divided amongst all the halls. The house chief of the original house will then become clan chief. The new house shall select a new house chief. All tiers of the hall system shall endeavor to hold no more than 25 entities under its chief tier. If a tier reaches 25 entities and it is the highest tier, the tier shall work to split into 5 entities, each containing 5 chiefs of the previous tier. The 5 lesser chiefs shall then elect a chief for their newly created entities, and the 4 new tier chiefs with the original one shall elect a chief for the new tier level. If a tier reaches 25 entities and it is not the highest tier, its tier chief will meet with the higher tier chief accompanied by one other chief of its tier in its higher entity selected by the chief with more than 25 entities. One additional chief of its tier in its higher entity will be selected at random. The 3 chiefs of its tier in the higher entity will work with the higher entity chief to distribute the lower tiers amongst the other tiers, or create a new entity under the higher tier if that is their decision. Elections. All chiefs higher than clan tier may only serve for a single term lasting approximately 2,554 days, rounded to the nearest logical annual tracking period so as to be consistent and predictable with local calendars. Elections for the tier will be held approximately 2,554 days, rounded to the nearest logical annual tracking period so as to be consistent and predictable with local calendars, with the election date being approximately 1,461 days after the last election of the lower tier. When a new entity with different election periods joins or is created, all lower tiers will have their natural term end synchronized to the highest tier in the greater governance structure, with all current terms expiring at their new natural end of the term, with the same consequences as if the position was filled in any other manner. Clan and house chiefs are lifetime appointments. However, their seat may be up for election if requested by a petition containing 2/5 of the tier below them, which are the house's haulers for a house chief, or the clan's house chiefs for a clan chief. A new clan chief requires 4/5 of the possible votes in the final round for a new individual to replace the current clan chief. A house chief requires 3/5 of the possible votes in the final round to replace the current house chief. A vacancy may be filled in either by a simple majority. An election for a house or clan chief will occur if there is a vacancy, if done by the petition of the tier below them, or if a quarter of all the haulers in the clan at the time submit a petition to elect a new house or clan chief, with at least one of them belonging to the house of the chief at issue. A chief may verify haulers signed a petition to call for an election, but may not invalidate any hauler's request for one or take any action to attempt to avoid holding an election when requested. Haulers found unsuitable or incapable after a petition is presented still count to the number for the sake of verifying a legitimate petition. Elections consist of the tier 2 lower to the elected position selecting a single nomination of a hauler who is under the open chief position for that position. The nomination is given to their chief, or their hauler if the election is for a house chief. The person who received all the nominations will then create a list of all the people the tier under them nominated, and distribute the list of nominations back to the tier under them. That tier that gave the nominations will consider the list for 2 weeks. At the end of the 2-week period, each of the nominating tier will then hand a ballot consisting of their top 3 choices ranked according to their desirability for that choice for the chief position to that person. All the votes will be counted by the one who distributed the list and the top choice picked. That candidate will have their name recorded. Then the ballots will be counted again with that individual disqualified, selecting the second choice from each ballot that had their first choice disqualified. The winner of that round will have their name recorded, and then the ballots will be counted again with the two recorded names disqualified, selecting the second or third choice as necessary for the ballots who had one or both of their two disqualified names on the ballot. The third name will then be recorded. The three names recorded from the ballots will be combined on one list and submitted to a council made of everyone who received the nominations. Those will be combined into a master list of candidates for the position, then distributed as a final list amongst all the people in the council. The new list will be considered by all the members of the council for 1 week. Then at the end of the week, the council will reconvene. Each person will hand a ballot consisting of a first and second choice to the council, and the council will select one person to count the ballots by a random draw. All the votes will be counted, discounting all candidates that receive no primary votes first, then discounting the candidate who has the lowest number of votes and redistributing anyone who selected that choice to their second choice. The process of removing the lowest candidate and redistributing secondary votes to the second choice will continue until only two candidates remain. If there is a tie in who is the lowest candidate in any round of evaluation, the candidate with the least amount of primary choice votes will be considered to have the lowest number of votes. When only two candidates remain, the council will adjourn and a week will be given for all members of the council to consider the two remaining choices. At the end of the final week, the council will get together and their members each will select one of the two as their choice for chief by a simple ballot. If the chief in consideration is for a clan or house without a vacant seat and did not achieve the needed threshold in the final round over the incumbent chief, the candidate does not become the chief. Otherwise, they become chief of the tier. A chief elected in such a manner will only serve until the natural end of the term, which might not be for the full 2,554 days. If they serve for 700 or more days, they shall be barred from serving another term in that position. If the natural term is less than 700 days, it shall not count for term limits. A chief must be a hauler and hold no more than one chief title above clan tier. If a chief is put in for consideration of more than one chiefdom above clan tier, they must voluntarily withdraw from all but one election after the completion of the first vote at the end of the nomination process and before the council convenes. If a chief is made ineligible for the position they hold, the tier above theirs will select a temporary interim chief. If there is no tier above the vacancy, the chiefs of the lower tier will select one of their own by simple majority as a temporary interim chief. A chiefdom with a midterm vacancy will hold an election for the period of the remaining part of the term, replacing the interim chief on their election. If the partial term is greater than or equal to 750 days, the term will count for term limits and the new chief will be ineligible for another term in that position. A chief that takes action to prevent an election from occurring, refuses to step down for a legitimately elected new chief, or encourages deceit in the voting process for the purposes of gaining power, has violated their ethical duty as a chief and should be immediately evaluated for suitability. All ballots are cast as public ballots, and all ballots must be available for review by anyone who cast a ballot under that tier. Furthermore, the final vote for a chief must be a public event accessible to every member of the governance under the chief tier who wishes to observe, with a public and open broadcast, if necessary. Professional licensing. No licensing will be required for any job or service performed by a hall hand, freehand, or hauler so long as the freehand, hauler, or hall hand has not misrepresented their education, skills, identity, or other details that might affect the selection of their expertise for a particular task. A freehand who misrepresents themselves and harms a hall hand or freehand will be required to engage in mediation or arbitration of Council of Chiefs to correct any harm that might occur. A hauler who misrepresents themselves or allows one of their hall hands to misrepresent themselves should be evaluated for suitability on the basis of deceit used to gain someone else's property. Service to the clan. Every hall hand with the right of self-determination owes 1 day of service obligation for every 7 days they hold that right, owed to the clan as a clan conscript, computed in blocks of 30 days to halls. These days are assigned to a hall of each hauler, and they are the responsibility of the hauler of each hall. These days remain with the hall and its hauler even if the hall hand leaves the hauler's hall. Every 180-day period of service obligation days requires the hauler to make one hall hand with self-determination available for conscription, to the number of up to 1/3 of all the hall hands with self-determination in the hall, with a minimum of one hall hand made available. These days may be traded or transferred, and may be served by hall hands with self-determination in the hall or the hauler of the hall. Service may be served by individuals who agree to serve in place of the hall who are either free hands, other haulers, or the hall hands of other haulers. The availability of others to serve does not obligate a hall to provide more clan conscripts available greater than the minimum they are expected to provide, although if the conscript order permits it, a hauler may provide more conscripts than the minimum required on a voluntary basis. Any transactions of service obligation days must be reported to the clan chief. No hauler may acquire from trade more than 2,554 days of service obligation days for each possible clan conscript they may be required to provide, and must reduce the required service obligation days to below their minimum conscriptable hall hands, times 2,554, before they acquire more service obligation days in trade again. No hauler may owe more than 5,180 days of service obligation days for each hall hand with self-determination in their hall in total. All days earned in excess of that will be discarded. The clan chief is responsible for tracking the conscription status of all members of their clan and shall report that information to higher tier chiefs when requested. Every hauler owes 1 day of hauler service obligation for every 7 days as a hauler to the clan. These days accrue as a debt over time until 1,461 days are owed, and then no new days are added to potential service until the days are spent by activation and the hauler owes less than 1,460 days of potential service. The obligation can be traded or transferred upon activation prior to the period that the hauler must muster, but only to hands of merit or haulers. Haulers must be given a minimum of 1 month notice before they are required to muster for hauler conscription. Serving as a chief, as staff to a chief, or paid support to clan conscript operations does not count as clan conscript service, even if paid by Hallish governance funds at a clan conscript reimbursement rate. Clan conscript service shall only be for service recognized by greater custom as civil service for the good of the community and outside of governance roles or prestige service. Prestige organized units that have a purpose of demonstrating combat types of skills or performance for entertainment but are not primarily used for open conflict or are not kept in a constant state of readiness to defend Hallish persons shall count as prestige service and shall not count as clan conscript service even during an emergency or open conflict. Conscripted activities must always be for the common good of the members of the Hallish governance and never for the personal benefit of the tier chief assigning the conscripted action. These actions shall include law enforcement, military defense, fire protection, emergency medical aid, search and rescue, natural resource husbandry, infrastructure maintenance, infrastructure construction, distant exploration, and other activities that are clearly in the common good of the Hallish governance. The existence of any organization of mustered conscripts to perform a duty will not be used to prevent private action of the same duty by individual freehands, haulers, or hall hands. Private action in the same field as training in a conscription field does not count towards conscription obligation, although education gained and paid for by the clan can be used by Hallish individuals for private gain. Haulers must be given a minimum of 1 month notice before specific skill clan conscript hall hands are required to muster for conscription, or 1 week notice for clan conscripts of a general nature called in response to an emergency. General nature conscripts may muster early on a voluntary basis if permitted by the tier chief assigning the conscripted action. Every Hallish individual under conscription obligation is required to spend a period during their life working on skills that may be required during a conscription. The exact skill worked on shall be determined through agreement between a hauler and clan chief of the potential conscripted individual. Any cost to acquire this education will be funded by the clan, but getting the education does not count to service obligation, nor is time spent in education qualified for reimbursement of time unless the education can be shown to hold no value outside of clan conscript service. A clan is responsible for maintaining reasonable equipment used by its conscripts in the manner the clan has determined the conscripts to be operating. Each clan has the ability to establish its military conscript forces in any form of organization or purpose as it requires. Each clan should coordinate with other clans to ensure it is equipped in such a manner that it provides for the best common defense of clans in the local geographical area. For equipment necessary for the common defense of a Hallish governance beyond the means of an individual clan to provide and operate it, a tier chief may require multiple clans to cooperate for the management of personnel of the larger equipment, and delegate a clan amongst those clans to house the necessary conscript equipment. The higher tier will be responsible for the costs associated with the maintenance of the larger equipment, just as the clans who are delegated the duty will be responsible for keeping up the training of personnel for that equipment. At no time will the equipment be directly commanded by an individual not a member of one of the clans required to provide the personnel to operate the equipment, and any clan who assigns personnel to the equipment may activate the conscript requirements of the equipment as they would any other clan conscript. Any clan that activates the equipment will be responsible for reimbursing clan conscripts from other clans for their time, including providing clan conscripts for operating for the benefit of the other clans to reimburse the clans for now unavailable clan conscript service obligation. All time will be reimbursed at the originating conscript's clan conscript reimbursement rate. A clan has free rein to deploy clan conscripts of the clan in its territory in defense of itself or as a response to conditions that require it. A clan may, at the request of another clan in the local geographical area, send its defensive assets to aid another clan in a defensive operation, engaging any threat that might lie between the clans, so long as the threat is an encroaching threat and not a pre-existing outsider group. No group of clan conscripts may be engaged in service unless they are operating during a time of emergency declared by their clan chief with a finite listed duration, during a time of recognized conflict established in a grand conclave, or as an organized unit which shall only accept clan conscripts in a voluntary basis with a specified contract for a specified duration. Under no circumstances is a Hallish person to serve as an involuntary clan conscript without a time that they are to be released from service, and no involuntary service may extend past that time. Every release of an involuntary conscript from service shall reduce the number of hall hands a hauler is required to provide by one for every 360 days from the date of the release of the clan conscript from active service. This may reduce the number of hall hands a hauler is required to provide to 0. This reduction cannot be transferred or traded and remains with a hall and not with the released hall hand. Release from voluntary clan conscript service does not reduce the number of hall hands a hall is required to provide. However, hall hands or haulers serving as voluntary clan conscripts are counted in the number of hall hands a hall is providing to clan conscript service. Tier chiefs are responsible for transporting and managing all logistical activities in deploying clan conscripts and helping clans reimburse conscripts for their time serving in the interests of their clan. This is true for disasters and armed conflict both. Clan conscripts shouldn't be compensated for time they don't effectively serve for when they invoke their right of self-interest. Nor will ineffective time count as clan conscript service in accounting for conscript service owed by a hall. Ineffective time will be considered the 30 days prior to invoking their right of self-interest. The hauler responsible for the ineffective conscript will be responsible for returning any resources provided for ineffective service directly back to wherever source those resources came from. No force compromising less than 1/4 of female Hallish conscripts shall engage in combat action outside territory controlled by a Hallish governance, including engagement with outsider groups in between two disjointed territories. A force shall be considered any group of Hallish defensive personnel operating out of the same immediate location of less than a 5-mile radius, or 1 hour travel if in a unit of a similar defensive equipment type that operates at significant speeds. Management Council. Clans may accept territory offered to them for management as a unified governance for a territory. The clan will either create a joint management council for governing a territory established through this with the starting districts and procedures, or join a pre-existing management council if doing so contributes to a geographical coherency. Every clan chief of a clan who is part of the management council territory will be a voting member of the council of the governing structure of the management council, with vote in the council of 1 per 100 members in the clan rounded up to the nearest 100. Counted in this sum are all members of the clan, regardless of where they reside. Residents in the management territory who are not free hands, hall hands, or haulers will be considered Hallish outsider citizens and are assigned representation, established as districts via geographic boundaries selected approximately every 3,652 days as established by method chosen by the Management Council, occurring on a predictable date that is easily identifiable in advance by all residents of the management territory in accordance with local custom. 1 non-clan district will be created for every 100 outsider citizens in the management territory older than the age of determination residing in the management territory, rounding up to the nearest 100. The geographical boundaries of each district will contain all residents of the district and should contain approximately 100 of the individuals used to determine the number of non-clan geographical districts as is reasonable. The Management Council should make an effort to ensure each district is geographically coherent and meets the size expectations, with a preference for establishing geographical borders of each district along prominent landmarks or preserving long-standing geographical borders over the aim of achieving exactly the required population. The Management Council will hold a census approximately every 3,652 days, at least 30 days prior to the establishment of geographical borders of districts, but as established by method chosen by the Management Council with enough time allotted for disputes involving issues relating to establishing district borders to be resolved. The census serves the purpose of getting a count for the representation established and will last as the official count until the next census. The Management Council will keep an informal count of all residents of the management territory through biannual reporting done approximately every 183 days, gathered from the representatives of each district as well as the clan chiefs of each containing clan. But this number will not be used to modify the district borders in any way. Both the official count and unofficial count will be considered a public record and open to access by any Hollish citizen of the management territory, including individuals of clans under the management territory who are not active residents of the management territory due to residing elsewhere. No outsider citizen representative may sit as an outsider citizen representative for longer than 30 days without being elected into that position at the last election. No management council may go for longer than 1,830 days without holding a new election for outsider citizen representatives. Representatives for outsider citizens may be removed from their representative role in an arbitration of Council of Chiefs for the same causes by which a holler may be found unsuitable. Term limits, procedures for elections, and procedures for filling vacated outsider citizen representative seats will be established by vote by the Management Council at the time district borders are established. If the Management Council does not come to a consensus, the previous census's rules for term limits and election procedures will be applied. Any clan chief who holds a chiefdom of a higher tier above clan may not sit on a management council as a representative and must instead designate one of their clan's haulers to act as the clan representative to the management council until the clan chief's higher tier chiefdom ends. Management territorial integrity. The Management Council will work to ensure that the management territory has free public thoroughfares that permit travel inside and across management territory. A clan should not be part of more than a single Management Council territory. Whenever required, a clan should work with other clans to trade houses so that all of a clan is in a single Management Council territory. Individual Hollish citizens may own property inside a Management Council territory. The Hollish citizens hauler must pay taxes to any Management Council that any member of their hall holds property in. All Hollish citizens with a property interest in a Management Council territory must act in all ways as is required of a Hollish outsider citizen while inside the Management Council territory as a landowner, with no opt-out permitted for members of a Hollish governance that shares the same highest chief tier. Any territory owned by a Hollish citizen adjacent to Management Council territory will become Management Council territory. The clan chief of the Hollish citizen whom has their territory annexed into the Management Council territory will assist to resolve any hardship such annexation creates, with the expectation to cover their new obligations within a reasonable time and the understanding that the right of final refusal remains open as a final resort to prevent such annexation if the burden is unconscionable. Hollish citizens of clans from outside the clans in a Management Council territory who own land inside the Management Council territory should find a chief of a clan inside the Management Council territory to represent them in any issues with the Management Council. That clan chief will act as clan chief in any situation that would need to be arbitrated in the Management Council where a clan chief is required. There is no additional representation beyond this given for Hollish citizens of other clans for residing in a Management Council territory outside of their own clan. Areas adjacent to the Management Council territory but not inside the governance of the Management Council are not considered protected territory of the Management Council, and physical protection and governance of the Management Council territory will not extend to them, even if they are paying for access to Management Council infrastructure through a fee. House and clan-at-large property is protected by their clan, and damage to Management Council territory that arises from house or clan property due to mismanagement of said property will be the responsibility of the clan chief of the clan or house the property belongs to. This includes issues that enter the clan property only to later exit the clan property, but only to the degree that responsibility of the issue is reasonable to be applied to the clan's mismanagement of their property sovereignty. Management Territory Hauler Guard. The Management Council will be granted one hauler from amongst the clans of the Management Council in a rotating basis from amongst all member clans to serve as hauler guard. The hauler guard will serve a term set in length as established by the Management Council. The position of the hauler guard is tasked to the clans, selected by the clan chief whose turn it is to provide it, and the Management Council has no say over the specific individual tasked to perform the station of hauler guard. If a hauler tasked by a clan chief is unable to perform the role of hauler guard before their term is up, the clan chief of the clan that appointed them will appoint a new hauler for the role. The hauler tasked as hauler guard may not hold any chiefdoms and should be willing and able to perform the duties of hauler guard. The hauler guard is reimbursed for their time in the manner of a clan conscript and is reimbursed by their clan at their clan's clan conscript reimbursement rate. Service as a hauler guard will count towards a hall's service obligation days, but not hauler's service obligation unless the hall selected has no other conscript service obligation days. If a hall has no service obligation days, it may trade service obligation days from others to gain financial benefit from their service as a hauler guard, but must do so in an open market manner that prevents such transactions creating the appearance of bias. No hauler assigned as hauler guard may be removed as hauler guard without cause or the hauler's consent prior to the expiration of their term, including by their clan chief. The Management Council is required to provide a reasonable budget for staff, equipment, and general operations of the hauler guard and their staff. The hauler guard will be in charge of the safety and integrity of the Management Council territory. The hauler guard must be a hauler and a member of a clan that is part of the Management Council, and their hall must be inside or directly adjacent to Management Council territory. All individuals operating as staff for the hauler guard shall carry about their persons a stick capable of being used in a haulish duel. All staff of a hauler guard must be aware of how to administrate a haulish duel, even if they themselves are not haulers, even if they are not residents of any hall system governance and are contracted workers completely outside the hall system. The hauler guard or their staff may not be tasked by the Management Council for resource collection, policy enforcement, or any other task not directly related to the preservation of the rights and the willing safety of residents, citizens, and visitors of the Management Council territory. The hauler guard and their staff may not serve as accusing or as a chief in any arbitration of Council of Chiefs involving the Management Council or the Management Council territory, although they may act as defending. The hauler guard must have the single purpose of defending all the rights of any occupant of Management Council territory, particularly from sources of authority of the Management Council, with the charge to the hauler as their defining mission. All clan chiefs of a Management Council territory have an obligation to provide full support of the hauler guard, which includes full activation and support of clan conscript forces for the defense of Management Council territory. All residents of Management Council territory will have their identity known either by their house chief or their direct representative, the appropriate one who may be contacted to verify they are not restricted from Management Council territory. All residents of Management Council territory must provide the information on who they are and who their house chief or representative is when requested by the hauler guard, their staff, a member of a clan when in proximity to property owned by a member of their clan, or representatives of the management council or other such persons appointed by the management council. No person is required to carry proof of identity, but may be forcefully escorted by the Holler Guard or their staff for the purpose of verifying identity if the Holler Guard or their staff believe it necessary. At the discretion of the Holler Guard or their staff, they may be detained while their chief or representative comes to them for identity verification instead. Any individual who refuses to identify themselves to the Holler Guard or their staff may be detained or resisted as an act of defense of others if they refuse to cooperate with the Holler Guard. Visitors from outside the Management Council territory must obey all commands from the Holler Guard and their staff. It is not the role or responsibility of the Holler Guard or their staff to monitor, handle, or prevent criminal activity. Any organization tasked by the Management Council with those responsibilities may not interfere with the Holler Guard or their staff in the execution of the duties and responsibilities of the office of the Holler Guard. No outsider citizen should be confined while waiting for a mediation or an arbitration of Council of Chiefs. Furthermore, no visitor who is not barred from entry shall be restricted in engaging in commerce with the people residing in Management Council territory. If a person is found to be a danger to themselves or others, the Holler Guard will be tasked to provide constant monitoring and escort of them until such a time as their mediation or arbitration of Council of Chiefs is to occur, or their business is completed and they are leaving Management Council territory. The office of the Holler Guard will be responsible to act in defense of anyone who may be harmed by the outsider citizen or visitor under their supervision. Management Territory Taxation. The Management Council establishes and manages a tax structure on all land property granted for its management, where the cost of all the Management Council territory's infrastructure and expected improvements, operational expenses, and surplus treasury are calculated and proportionally divided as an annual land tax amongst the territory not held by a clan or house holding. This tax will take into account only the strain on the infrastructure and community by the use of the property, and not the income that is derived from the property for the owner. This tax applies to members of a clan or a house if the property in question is not owned by the house or clan at large. The tax on each property will remain roughly the same as when it was initially accepted into the Management Council territory in the effectiveness of resources, adjusted for any change of value of medium of trade, with no more than a 1% adjustment per 366 days, and then only in the direction to be properly proportional to the tax assessed to the rest of the Management Council territory. The actual cost and resources will be known at least 360 days in advance of them being due, and may be given in partial payments in sums of any amount prior to them being due. The owner of the property or the Management Council may request a specific change in a tax if there is a dramatic difference in the tax rate of the property and the tax rate of the rest of the Management Council territory, or if new infrastructure is being added in adjacent Management Council territory-owned property that the property might make use of. A change in the tax for a property beyond the 1% permitted requires 4/5 of the Management Council to vote to approve. Any changes in the amount due must be made 60 days prior to the start of the 360 days in which the amount due is made known prior to being due. The property holder, if not a member of a clan who is part of the greater Hallish governance the Management Council is under, may refuse to accept a property tax adjustment issued upon it and have that property removed from the Management Council territory structure. That property, if removed, may then be blocked from common public access to infrastructure or charged a flat monthly fee for infrastructure connections. The fee for infrastructure connections will be set by the Management Council and be uniform across all Management Council areas based on the nature of the use of the infrastructure in a manner that is just and fair, but will include estimates of annual maintenance and expansion and will be at least 2% greater than what the amount would be for if calculated for a property that is part of the Management Council territory. A clan is responsible for any property tax bill due to a management council or outsider governance of a hall of one of its member houses up to the annual amount the hall paid to the house in the previous 366 days. The hall's house will compensate the clan for any taxes paid in this manner. This does not apply for property that is not the physical location of the hall of a hauler. A management council should maintain a positive budget. It should reach a funding level capable of funding all services and infrastructure, including reasonable expected expansions to the infrastructure, for a period of 21,600 days. All resources collected beyond its funding level should be returned proportionally to those who paid into the management council annually. Management Territory Dispute Resolution. The Management Council may make Management Council offices staffed by individuals to see to the management of establishing mediations, arbitrations of Council of Chiefs, and monitoring services of outsiders who are in the process of leaving the management territory or awaiting an arbitration of Council of Chiefs, as well as any offices necessary for managing combined infrastructure, tax collection, or emergency services. All outsider citizens residing in the management territory will be treated as if a free hand from outside any clans inside the management council for consideration of their rights or for disputes with members of clans inside the management council territory. In any dispute of an outsider citizen with a clan member, the representative of the outsider citizen or the representative of the area closest to where they reside will act as their appropriate chief in the Hallish dispute resolution process. Any arbitration of Council of Chiefs that occurs in management council territory involving an outsider citizen must have an outsider citizen representative sitting as one of the chiefs of the Council of Chiefs. In any action where self-determination is removed of an outsider citizen, the outsider citizen will be given to the custody of an organization that has been hired by the management council for the managing of outsider citizen criminals, and the outsider citizen will be held in custody by that organization in a manner that prevents risk to others yet still keeps the dignity of the human individual and respect of their rights, both as a human and as any Hallish freehand may expect, intact as much as is reasonably possible. This organization may not be associated with the Haller Guard in any manner. Outsider citizens ordered confined by an arbitration of Council of Chiefs will remain in the custody of the hired organization until the conditions that were established by the arbitration of Council of Chiefs have been met. Then shall be immediately released. All outsider citizens held in custody by the custodial organization have the same right to contact haulers as a haul hand, and all outsider citizen representatives count as haulers for the purpose of this right in relation to outsider citizens. Any outsider citizen that invokes the right of final refusal will be expected to depart management council territory within 7 days or as soon as reasonably possible given geographic understanding and potential local custom. For outsider citizens whom have been evicted from management council territory, The Management Council will assign the Holler Guard to provide a guard and escort for the former outsider citizen who invoked their right of final refusal until they are able to leave, or to forcibly remove them if they refuse to depart at the end of the grace period they are given. Any former citizen who invoked the right of final refusal is not permitted in Management Council territory, and their entry may be resisted as an act of defense of others. Any property an evicted outsider citizen owns that remains in Management Council territory will still be considered their property. In the event a dispute arises regarding the property of a former citizen who invoked the right of final refusal, the former citizen is responsible to find a Holler who is a member of the Greater Hollish Governance to act on their behalf, or transfer the property to someone who agrees to follow Hollish Governance for the Management Council territory. If the former citizen refuses to do either, the Management Council will remove the property from the Management Council territory, or if that is not viable, force the sale of the property to an individual who does agree to follow Hollish Governance. Resources for such a sale do not belong to the Management Council and may not be confiscated by anyone acting on behalf of or at the direction of the Management Council or any associate of it. Utilizing this process in a corrupt manner is the same as performing an act of corruption as a Holler chief. Management moots and management conclaves. In the event a Management Council requires cooperation with others, it will select 3 of its members to form a management moot with other Management Council's representatives or clan moot representatives in a manner similar to an assembly of clans. 1 member of the Management Council moot representatives must be a Holler of a clan of the Management Council. All management moot representatives will meet and negotiate decisions. Those decisions will be brought back to the Management Council by their representatives, and the Management Council will vote on the decisions. The management moot will then reconvene and report the outcome of the votes. Anything that requires approval for all Management Councils will then be executed if all voted for the decision. If only partial approval was required, those who voted to agree will have their decisions executed in their own respective Management Council territories. If the amount of representatives in a management moot is too unwieldy, a management conclave may be formed by local Management Council moot representatives establishing cooperatives with 2 other Management Councils for the sake of an issue, and those cooperatives of representatives selecting 1 of each of their number to go to the Management Conclave. 1 member of the Management Conclave representatives must be 1 of the clan representatives. If the Management Conclave is still too unwieldy, the Management Conclave representatives may form into a higher tier Management Conclave with 2 other Management Conclaves of the same tier, again selecting a representative from each Management Conclave, with 1 again requiring to be 1 of the clan representatives. This will continue until a Management Conclave of a manageable size is formed. The decisions that Management Conclave establishes will be reported through each tier of Management Conclave representatives until it again reaches a Management Council's representatives, who will then pass decisions to their Management Councils to vote on them. Once the Management Councils have voted, they will reform back into the same Management Conclave structure up to the highest Management Conclave tier in tier order, and report the results of the votes and execute any decisions if appropriate. If a Management Conclave tier does not have enough representatives to form a 3-representative structure block, the representatives that were unable to find a management moot partnership will send their clan representative to the Management Conclave tier, and will either be alone or join together with the other sole representative as a group of 2. Right of Nations. When a clan operates under an outsider governing structure and the outsider governance has a law where obedience to the law would cause a Holler to be unsuitable, the Holler may follow the law without being declared unsuitable so long as they follow all the laws of that outsider governance. A hauler who chooses to act in all ways a hauler in defiance of an outsider governance does not maintain their right to be defended by chiefs. However, they may not be penalized for doing so as long as they follow all haulish requirements regardless of their legality. Discharge of debts. All personal debts owed or established by a haul hand are a hall's debt, and the responsibility for those debts falls to a hall's hauler. Such debts, when acquired, will be immediately transferred to the haul hand's haul. All personal debts owed or established by a hauler are a hall's debt, and responsibility for them falls to a hall's hauler. Such debts, when acquired, will be immediately transferred to the hauler's haul. Debts shall follow hauls. In the event of the death of a hauler, the debt remains with the haul and is the responsibility of any new hauler of the haul. If a haul dissolves, half the debt will be divided amongst any new free hands or haulers of the former haul. The other half follows the former hauler if they became a free hand. Otherwise, the debt is distributed equally amongst any new free hands of the former haul. Debt is assigned after the distribution of a former hall's assets and may not be used to make a claim on any assets that belonged to the former hall, even if some of those assets follow haul hands to a new hall. If there are no free hands or haulers of the former hall, the debt will be considered discharged and cannot follow any other individuals of the former hall. A free hand or hauler who is assigned debt that was secured by an asset that was transferred with a haul hand is responsible for the debt even if they do not hold the asset. A free hand with debt that becomes a hauler or haul hand shall have all of their debt applied to their new haul. No debt shall be considered valid if it has not been acknowledged as valid by a hauler or free hand responsible for it, or has been recognized as valid by an arbitration of Council of Chiefs. A hauler may declare any alleged debt that has been alleged to their haul and not recognized as valid by an arbitration of Council of Chiefs as invalid. It must be done in writing to an alleged creditor. A hauler making payment to a debt they deem invalid does not validate the debt. Any debt that has not been recognized as valid for a period greater than 3,600 days is considered discharged. Any payment of alleged debt by a hauler or free hand to a creditor that is later found invalid will not be required to have paid resources returned. In the event a chiefdom is abolished, any debts owed by that chiefdom will be extracted from the assets of the chiefdom. If any debt remains afterwards, the debt will be abolished with the chiefdom. If any assets are left after a chiefdom is abolished, they will be distributed to the next tier under them. If that tier does not exist, any assets will be divided proportionally to any that were under the former chiefdom. If no entity exists under the former chiefdom, all resources owned by the chiefdom shall be donated to the first entity that comes along that both takes on the cause of investigation of the loss of the chiefdom and pursuing justice if applicable, and is either a haulish governance or has as its mission the cause of advocacy for freedom. Starvation, seizure. A house that has halls unable to feed themselves due to emergency conditions may seize the agricultural output from someone utilizing the house's agricultural land for personal gain if the purpose and practical outcome of the seizure is feeding the house's halls. Seizure of this output will incur a debt equal to the fair market value of the seized agricultural output placed upon the chiefdom owed to the entity the agricultural property was seized from. Vacancy, seizure. If a property adjacent or inside of Klan territory is identified as having no known owner after vigorous research and has been vacant for at least 21,600 days, the property may be seized by the Klan chief and given away, but only for no compensation or consideration, to a non-chief hauler of the Klan, chosen at random from amongst haulers who wish to acquire the land. If an owner is identified in the next 21,600 days, the property shall be returned to that owner and the owner compensated for the trespass out of Klan resources. For the sake of vacancy seizure in Management Council territory, whichever Klan provided the hauler guard is considered adjacent to all territory inside and adjacent to the Management Council territory. A Klan executing a vacancy seizure in a Management Council territory where they only meet the requirements due to their position as hauler guard must permit any hauler of other clans of the Management Council territory and any Hallish outsider citizen who has resided in Management Council territory for at least 3,652 days to participate in the lottery for acquisition of the property. Creditor compensation seizure. Outside of vacancy or starvation seizure, no property may be seized except in compensation for an unpaid, valid debt. A seizure of property may never be used to pay interest, and any debt that accrues interest after a seizure action has been executed is no longer a valid debt. No property may be seized without a finding to do so issued by an arbitration of Council of Chiefs, and the finding to permit a seizure must be done in a separate action after the previous arbitration of Council of Chiefs has found the debt to be valid. Additionally, the seizure must have agreement for the action by the Klan chief with the largest responsibility of the entity with the debt, and may not be done less than 180 days after the validation of the debt by an arbitration of Council of Chiefs. If a seizure finding is issued by arbitration of Council of Chiefs, the arbitration of Council of Chiefs will task a hauler from the clan of the entity having their property seized to perform the seizure, or their outsider citizen representative if they are an outsider citizen. All seized property not in the manner of the medium of exchange will be assessed at real fair market value plus 7% and will be applied immediately to the debt even if the creditor is unable to liquidate seized property. If the creditor liquidates property at greater than its assessed value, the creditor owes the difference of the liquidated sum and the sum applied to the debt, owed immediately, with those resources ineligible to be transferred to any outstanding debt. No property may be seized if the seizure of the property in question would place a hall in danger of being unable to support its hall hands, or place a free hand in a position where they are unable to provide for themselves. A seizure action against a hall or outsider citizen family may only be taken once in a 90-day period, but it may be taken to resolve multiple debts or creditors at once. Any seizure of property owned by a Hallish citizen or outsider citizen outside of starvation seizure, vacancy seizure, or seizure authorized by an arbitration of Council of Chiefs is an act of violence against the Hallish governance of the individual and may be resisted in an act of defense by any tier chief or hauler guard and staff. Grand endeavor. A clan or greater chiefdom at its maximum funding level may start the process of a grand endeavor. A clan or greater chiefdom establishing a grand endeavor will find at least 5 halls whose members all have self-determination and all volunteer for a grand endeavor. These halls will not be permitted to have anyone lacking self-determination inside them for the duration of the grand endeavor, and any without self-determination that might end up in one of the halls undergoing a grand endeavor will be placed in other halls. A clan funding a grand endeavor can use up to its maximum funding level in resources for the establishment of a new house of at least 5 halls in a place which would be too expensive to establish a house under normal establishment processes. Any higher tier chiefdom that is at maximum funding level may use up to half of their stored resources in the effort of the grand endeavor. Those resources will be used for the establishment of a new house in the manner the grand endeavor has been established to do so. Multiple different tiers and chiefdoms may support the same grand endeavor. After the house has been established, any resources in excess of the maximum funding level of the new house shall be returned to all who participated in the grand endeavor proportionally to the amount the chiefdoms put into the grand endeavor. Vigilance against the rots. The hall system is for the preservation of liberty of the individual while providing a common defense and guard against things detrimental to liberty. For this, the hall system is structured as a society. For any society, there are 3 great rots that must be protected against, or the society will eventually collapse and decay. From the lowest hall hand to the greatest chief, monitor those you support so as not to allow the rots to decay your society. Guard against the rot of good intentions. It is hard for a leader to stand back and allow those under them to come to harm, and easy to protect someone from themselves. This is the first and greatest of rot. Guard your society from destroying its purpose to save its people. Guard against the rot of reputation. It is hard for a leader to listen to criticism of something that does good. Refusing to acknowledge the evil something does, or worse, hiding it so that greater good may be done, is a rot that hides in the darkness and decays the foundations a society needs for strength. Guard your society from hiding the villainous acts it does so that it may feel good about itself. Guard against the rot of charity. It is hard for a leader to look upon the suffering of others when they have the means to alleviate it. Emptying your treasury to help others seems noble, but it is against the notion of having a treasury at all. Guard against incurring expenses for the sake of others beyond the recovery rate in your treasury. Do not help if your treasury is not full. Guard your society from putting itself in a place where it doesn't have the resources for the things it collects resources to handle. These 3 great rots come from a place that seems good. To be generous in your help, to maintain a good reputation, and to protect your people are noble goals. However, when the rot sets in, the generation after the one that accepted the rot will suffer. Guard your society in the leaders that you choose, for the sake of those who will come after you. This is not to condemn the place the rots come from. A society cannot function without protecting itself, doing good works, and lifting up those who are not standing on their own. Guard must be kept simply because those avenues for destruction must likewise be kept open to keep the society healthy. Protect your people, enhance your reputation, and help others. But don't let those things consume your society. The 4th. To the victors of a war of aggression, give the plaque of Ozymandias.